Assalamu alaikum and welcome to Carnelian Insight. On today's episode, we are thrilled to have Dr. Raza, who has been in academia for the last 20 years and is currently assistant professor at NAS Business School. So we welcome you here at Carnelian Insight. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Farah.
On today's episode, we are going to discuss the insights into academia and in learning and development industry overall. So my first question to you is that being a teacher, a professor for so many years in higher education institutions, uh, what do you think how a teacher can captivate students and bring them towards the love of learning overall?
I think it starts with the teacher. Um, if the teacher loves the topic or the subject itself, I think it carries into the class. Also, I believe these are my own beliefs. People can agree or disagree with them. But preparation of a teacher and how they, introduce the student to the topics with real life examples, because I think today's student is slightly more interested how does it work in the real world.
True.
Okay, is this too theoretical or are there some applications? How do we apply? How does this help me grow? How does this help me reach my goals? There would be some subjects which students will not like because they don't align with their goals. But then again, it depends on how the teacher prepares for that particular topic, brings it to the class, and modifies it according to the need of the student. Sometimes I'm asked that what is the best method of teaching. So my answer to that is there isn't one method of teaching. It really depends on your audience. You walk into, in fact, for the last 20 years, every class of mine, the first day, is a new experience for me because I get to know a new batch of students and I might need to modify my methods according to the student. Yes, there are certain benchmarks that we have to fulfill. Those benchmarks are basically course outcomes. But then, how do you use those various toolkits, methods that we have? Will I be teacher centered? Will I be student centered? Will I use case studies? So it really depends. Or would I go into the market with them? Experiential. Bring experience into the class. Guest speakers. So there are many methods. There isn't one particular way of cultivating that spark that would make the student say, aha, I love this subject. And there are many ways.
Absolutely. So I watched this TED talk the other day where the speaker was also talking about the similar thing. He told that when you are going in the class, so you need to have two things as a teacher. Number one is passion for the subject, and number two is preparation. So when you're passionate about a subject, then it shows in your body language, in your content, and also you have this conviction when you're delivering it, and the students can actually feel it. And then अगर कोई सवाल होते हैं तो they can then engage और इस तरह से yeah definitely very well said.
Also, how open is the faculty to the students'
Yes.
feedback?
True, very important.
The environment. If the environment is conducive for learning is two-way. You see, a faculty is not Mr. or Miss Know It All. You have to learn from the student too. And there's no harm in that. And you need to be open about it. You need to be open that the student brings in knowledge too. It may or may not be absolutely what you want, but you need to learn from them. And today's student, if you learn from them, that environment is developed and automatically they connect.
True.
And how would the student not love your subject if you're open
Absolutely.
to their feedback too? So
Yeah, and in today's world, especially, information is out there. You go to ChatGPT, you go to YouTube, you go to TED Talks, everything is there. So what you can as teacher inculcate in your classes is also learners-led methodology, because that is how they will be more intrigued and they'll come towards you and will accept and also immerse in the learning process overall.
I agree. In fact, Farah, the dynamics of learning has changed.
True.
It's no longer bringing, what the teacher is bringing to the class, the student might already know.
Yeah.
So, what does this teacher bring to the class? Maybe a direction to where search for more knowledge. Okay, join that student in that journey in search of more knowledge. So, gone are the days when you say, oh, the teacher would know it all, maybe, if that was the impression, and then the student will come to the teacher. Now they have information on a click of a
Yes.
button, maybe more so from the teacher, because obviously there are limitations of a person. I may not know everything, and as a teacher I need to understand that I need to be willing to accept that I don't know everything. And I think
Yeah.
that becomes the honesty in teaching. And I think students are very aware of when a teacher is bluffing. And a teacher
Yes.
shouldn't bluff.
True.
And even if you don't know the answer, there are many times questions can be asked which I don't know the answer to. So I can say, oh, well, okay, let's get back to it later. Let's search out and come back to it. And make sure to come back to it, not just to blow it off in the wind. Choro choro, kal hum baat kare. Baat kariye.
True.
So it would actually be, again, that's I think what triggers that interest in the subject.
Absolutely. So, moving on, you are an avid reader, right?
Hmm.
And you also thank you for this book. Just shout out to
My
Amber.
pleasure. My pleasure.
And yeah, so any book that you are reading currently, you mentioned this. So if you could share insights.
I just finished reading this. In fact, I read the same book, but it's for you, Farah. I hope you enjoy reading it. So it's an interesting book. It's an interesting title. The title is Before the Coffee Gets Cold, and it's so, although it's a novel, but there are a few snippets. I'm not going to tell you everything about it because I would like you to read it. And if somebody gets interested, they should go ahead and read it too. It's available also online for the audiobook if somebody wants to do that. So the title says Before the Coffee Gets Cold. They talk about different scenarios, but the main takeaway is be open to new experiences. One, live in the present and catch whatever you can in the present. Forgive yourself, and that's more on a personal level. Forgive for some things you might not have been able to achieve in the past. Be open in communication. Be honest while communicating because it carries through. If you speak from your heart and if you're honest, the person, the audience knows it. If you're surface acting, then also the audience knows it. So these are some of the points that were highlighted in the book, and it's beautifully written, and these are some of the points from it. So I hope you enjoy reading it.
Thank you. So, coming back to the insights regarding learning and development in education.
Mm-hmm.
So, since I mentioned ChatGPT and
Uh-huh.
personalized learning is a
Mhm.
very big trend in today's
Mhm.
universities and schools and colleges, right?
Mhm.
So, what about the assessment?
Mm.
How is that changing?
Mm. You see, now the assessment is like a catch 22, in my opinion, especially from a student's perspective.
Yeah.
But I'm going to answer this question from a quality specific aspect of things. Although I think assessment tends to make this scary evil monster in a lot of people's minds, but assessment is important for quality. Not quality per se for the student, but the quality of the program or the course. Assessment is the completion of a loop. Now, if I were to ask you which program you would like to apply for, you're going to look for the best programs. What are the ways to identify that? Accreditations, international accreditations.
Yeah.
Now, assessment is a very integral part of, let's say, accreditation. Now, what happens is that after you've conducted an assessment of a student based on certain benchmarks or the rubrics of different courses or the learning outcomes of courses or the learning outcomes of programs, they have to be evaluated. They shouldn't just be a measure of a student's learning. It should also be a measure of how did your program do for the student. Well-known accreditation bodies actually look at your assessment as a standard to evaluate a program. And I'm a business faculty, so I can speak on behalf of the business accreditations, be it local HEC, be it local National Business Accreditation Council or international. Basically, the assessment is a completion of a loop. Post grading of papers of the student, they need to reflect on how the program did and then modify or improve the program accordingly. So, assessment is important.
Yeah,
But the thing is, why does a student get scared of assessment? That's the question.
absolutely.
The question is that something happened in the class
Hmm.
that the student wasn't really necessarily ready for this assessment.
Hmm.
The rubric or the learning outcomes weren't necessarily clear in the classroom. If your assessment becomes a fun activity, now if I give you an example of training, training is also assessed, isn't it? Whether you are a good trainer or aren't a good trainer. But there are certain rubrics, there are certain benchmarks. Now, faculty makes that very clear to the student. The student should have fun in that exam, shouldn't he? Ideally.
Yeah,
And if I know I'm going to be tested on this, and if I get the same thing similar, and that is increasing my knowledge bank, student should be all happy about it. So there's a missing link. That's what makes a student nervous. Now I'm speaking from a student's perspective. So basically, I gave you two perspectives, the
True.
quality assurance and the students. So I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, it does. And it also is becoming very hard, right? The assessment part, because abhi everything is as online.
Uh-huh.
So then assessment में क्या challenges हैं जो कि you are facing now that you were not facing before?
Actually, I wouldn't call it a challenge. I think, if you're very comfortable in your area, um, we have something called Bloom's taxonomy. That is where
Yeah.
you would know it too, training wise as well.
Hmm.
So basically, higher order testing in the sense that are you encouraging thinking, or is it just rote learning? If it's rote learning with online chat GPT and this and that, it's really not cutting the purpose.
Yes.
Are you making a student think?
Yes.
Are you making them think? If you are making them think and review and analyze, so you are actually moving it away from something that they can just copy paste. They have to put themselves into it, an investment. So it actually depends on the kind of assessment a faculty makes. I think what happens is that if a faculty is not aware of how to set an assessment, that's where the problem would arise.
Yes.
But if the faculty knows how to set an assessment that would make a student think, make a student read, and then review and write, I don't think that all these chat GPTs and others will have an impact.
Absolutely. And a very important thing that you mentioned is that education's purpose is to make them think and teach them how to think. It's not teach them how to रूट लर्न और फिर उसके बाद फैक्ट्स हमने सीख लिए, फिर हमने एग्जाम दे दिया, पास कर लिया और डिग्री ले ली, एंड दैट्स इट. If they are thinking about it, if they're thinking, what am I doing, why am I doing, how am I impacting the society, whatever, all of these things. So all of that comes from the teacher and the professor who inspires them.
Absolutely. I mean, you set the tone in the class.
Absolutely.
Am I being stringent in asking you to regurgitate what I just spoke in the class? Or are you supposed to take that home, think about it?
Yes.
And then come to some kind of an outcome or a conclusion. Again, the thinking aspect of it.
Absolutely.
Analyzing aspect of it. So it really depends on what the benchmarks have been set. What are the learning goals or the learning outcomes of a course? So I think it goes multiple layers. What are the learning outcomes of a program? What are the learning outcomes of a course? And how are they being translated in the classroom? Leads to a better outcome, assessment wise also, and making the student interested in the course, interested in the subject.
True. So, as we discussed, that role of teacher is also changing with time,
Yes.
right? So, what are the skills and competencies that you think a teacher in today's world require?
Well, the thing is, I think there's a lot of fear, if I may use that word, of technology. Maybe fear is a strong word. Apprehension.
Reluctance, yeah.
Apprehension.
Hmm.
Also, we are humans. We do not like to change. We think our way is the best way. But what if you incorporate the trends into your everyday teaching? It can be done. You might have to think out of the box. And that thinking out of the box for the teacher might require training. Might, I don't know. I mean, I'm just speaking out of my own, I'm speaking my thoughts. So basically, a teacher might need the support on how to, especially if a teacher is not really comfortable with technology, how to incorporate technology within the classroom.
Yes.
And by technology, I mean all the innovations that are coming around.
Hmm.
How they shouldn't fear if a student does have a mobile phone in the class.
Yeah. Yes.
Not every time a student is using a mobile phone in the class is just texting. It's okay.
Yeah.
Unless, of course, it is violating some rules of the
Yeah.
institute. I'm not talking about that. But if you want a student to actually use technology in the class, you need to be savvy in technology as well.
Yes.
And that's where I think maybe some teachers might require that support, especially a certain age group, because we have very senior, respected faculty members in our country and everywhere who might not be very hands on with technology. So they might need support. So I think that's an area. How
Yeah.
to incorporate technology in the classroom, how to ensure that ChatGPT does not influence the assessments,
Yes.
that too. Because I think the students are way ahead of us.
Yes.
And it's okay. Let's learn from them
Yes.
so that we catch up with them. It's not about they versus us, it's about we learning. So I think technology can be one aspect of a training for faculty.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, as we talked about teachers, so coming to the system overall,
Mhm.
so as a university or as a college, what support can you provide to a teacher and to students for a better learning environment?
Well, I'm going to answer this on a generic aspect. I think learning from each other, faculty members learning from each other, is also a good way of doing things,
Yeah.
You do not need to have formal training. If I know something,
Yes.
again, the environment should be such collaborative learning for faculty members too,
True.
which a lot of universities have. It is an inbuilt system, and because we are part of academia, so it is a more of a learning environment happening anyway, supporting each other
Yeah.
and learning from each other's mistakes. So there are many different forums where this can happen.
Yes.
Evaluation maybe of assessments too.
Yes.
One aspect is that if I'm making something unique, if not unique, something different, I can share it with my colleagues.
Yes.
And vice versa. So that can create that environment of if there's somebody who's struggling, they can be carried along and supported.
Yes. I don't know if there's any conference or forum या इस तरह से कोई platform जहाँ पे people from academia, the professors and PhDs and deans, they come together, share ideas, what's happening in their universities and what are the best practices and how we can learn from each other. Is there such platform?
We have business education councils where
Oh.
people do meet together and there are peer learning from each other.
Okay.
There are peer visits too. Academics, academia has that where different institutes, a committee of faculty members or senior academicians, visit different institutes to
Yeah.
give kind of a feedback on the processes. So yes, it's a very well defined
Nice.
internal review, and
Hmm.
HEC does that. Higher Education Commission does that too,
Nice.
as well as the Business Education Council. So we have certain,
That's awesome.
it
That's
is,
awesome. It
it
is
is
good
there. Yes.
because collaboration is the best strategy when it comes to education. All of these things.
Mm-hmm.
क्योंकि फिर वहाँ पे in a similar platform you get to know about different practices that you can adapt and आप अपनी classes में और अपनी university में बेहतर कर सकते हैं. Overall जो पूरा system है education का वो बेहतर हो सकता है.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
And speaking of collaboration, there is also a divide जो हम अक्सर देख रहे होते हैं education institutes और corporate world में कि there's a divide. But if we think about collaborating together again, इसमें भी corporate world and academia अगर वो collaborate करे तो it will be a very good bridge for students for good opportunities and academia as well. So they'll know कि क्या trends है market में, corporate में क्या चल रहा है वगैरह वगैरह. So your thoughts on this?
Okay, Farah, that's interesting. For the last 20 years, this topic has been discussed.
Oh wow.
Okay.
आपको कुछ हुआ नहीं?
नहीं हुआ है. That's what I'm
great.
saying.
That's
That's what
good.
I'm saying. ऐसा नहीं है कि बहुत ज़्यादा बड़ा ब्रिज है. Maybe ब्रिज छोटा हो गया.
That's excellent. Maybe I
नहीं,
don't know.
I mean, the thing is there is a collaboration.
Great.
In the sense that there are projects,
Hmm.
there are researches
Yes.
that are conducted for the industry.
Hmm.
Yes, it might be very siloed.
Yeah.
It might be very specific to certain universities,
Hmm.
but the process is there.
Yeah.
HSC also encourages it.
Yes.
So I think there is a movement. I think at the end of the day, there cannot be a gap between academia and the corporate.
True.
With strategic leaders being aware about the need of constant improvement in programs,
Yes.
there are processes and there are steps in place,
Exactly.
and we are working on it. I think it's not such a bleak picture as you might think it is.
Hmm.
Good things are happening.
Acha, my last question would be कि you've been teaching for 20 years, so
Yes.
आपने generation को change होते हुए देखा है. So now there are Gen Zs and previously दूसरी generation थी. So do you see any change in their behavior, their attitude overall? How is it, or are they same?
There's a lot of change. And there are some very positives, and there are some which are a little concerning. I think the current generation is not, and I don't mean this as a negative way, I think they're not very accepting of failures or setbacks. If something goes not according to their plan, it's like everything ended. They're not equipped with that. And I think that is one thing, that flexibility, that if something doesn't work for you, it's okay. That's just making you go towards maybe a newer direction.
Yes.
Or reevaluate yourself. So that's one thing which I feel the current one is different than the earlier. But they're very also, once they fight that overwhelming disappointment, they also bounce back pretty quick if they are able to. Now that's a very, now that you're making me think about it, it's a bit of strange, isn't it? On one hand,
Yes.
they're not really ready for the failure.
Yeah.
Yet, once they're out of it, yeah, let's do it. So it's a bit of an interesting generation. I think I have great hopes from them. And also, although this might sound very cliched, most people say this, but I think if they are motivated enough, they are more out there, willing to grind and get what they want to achieve. But I think that passion also sets them down. I think that's what it is. I think it's a very passionate group. If they are convinced of something and if they are not able to achieve it, then they really go down in dark places. But if they are able to achieve it, they are. So I think It's a difficult generation to keep motivated. They need to be steered in the direction where they're really capable of. Also, I think what is happening with this generation is that they want it all very quickly.
Yeah, that's true. I'd agree.
And I think maybe it's the social media doing that.
True.
They want everything.
Instantly.
They look at their peers, oh, they achieved this, I'm going to achieve this too. But you know what? It's okay if you don't achieve it. Maybe you're not cut out for that. Now, when you don't achieve that, this generation doesn't understand, maybe, and I don't mean it as a negative way, then not everybody is equipped to achieve what the other person has achieved. So the inspiration is very, very extreme, and they want to achieve it all. Now, that can be a positive way if they want to achieve it all,
Yeah.
but they need to know what their strengths are. If they know that, they'll really achieve a lot more. So it's an interesting generation. I like them. I honestly love teaching students, and that's why I've gone back to teaching. I spent about 2.5 years in administrative aspects of academia,
Oh, okay.
but now I've gone back to teaching because I think this generation requires that mentoring.
True.
So I hope I'm a good mentor for them.
That's excellent. So the thing that you mentioned about social media is absolutely right. क्योंकि बहुत ज़्यादा instantly हमें चीज़ें चाहिए होती हैं
बिल्कुल.
और इस generation को. So that's why we tend to forget that everybody has their own timelines and journey.
Exactly.
And things to resources too.
Yes.
So and also purpose. कि
Yes.
मेरा purpose कुछ और हो सकता है, लेकिन if I want that, so I have to evaluate myself. कि do I actually want that? Why do I want that?
Yes.
And all of these things. So I
Yeah.
think that's so true that we have to calm down and actually think about things and
Yes.
then go ahead.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
maybe the calm down is the
It's missing.
is the buzzword. Calm down. You can achieve it. Also, they don't like to hear this word. Calm down.
True.
Tell a new generation
Yeah.
kid calm down. Oh,
They're like, no,
no.
not happening.
So I hope I really think that great things can be achieved by this generation. They just need to find their niche.
Absolutely. And the last thing that you mentioned was mentorship. Extremely important.
Yes.
Extremely important
Yes.
for this generation and for everyone, even in corporate sector and in education sector. It's extremely important to have a mentor and to be someone's mentor. So that is again
I
a very
agree.
important word that I got out of that.
I agree. A mentor is so important. He or she anchors you. Will not really help you achieve much. You have to achieve on your own.
Yeah.
But it's an anchor.
True. Anchor is important.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Amber, for joining us today. It was
My
a
pleasure.
pleasure. It was a pleasure interacting with you and
Love
learning
talking
about
to you,
your-
Farah. It was
Exactly.
lovely.
Thank you so much. For
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Allah Hafiz.